on a Saturday here. Stop. Um, before we delve straight into the talk, and Preedip Balaji is the one that we're here to have a conversation with from IIHS. Before I introduce Preedip and before we jump into the talk, I just wanted to recap very briefly what the free library movement is. The free library movement is a call for creation of free accessible libraries available to all without discrimination or prejudice. And at the core of this call is basically recognizing the right to read and that books and information should be accessible to all. Uh, and we're not talking simply about reading in terms of increasing literacy rates or improving outcomes in school, though definitely there's enough data to correlate libraries and these outcomes. But reading just for the joy of reading, for the pleasure of reading, just for the sake of itself with no objective. Reading is thinking, reading is empowering, and we believe that reading helps people find their voices. Um, and That's really the backdrop in which we are having this talk about public libraries. And like we say, read in a democracy, for a democracy to function well, that the core of it is the idea is that all participants in the democracy can make conscious, informed choices. I think a lot of us are aware that large parts of our population can't make meaningful choices and are excluded from participating meaningfully because of lack of access to information. And libraries can really bridge this gap. Libraries can be places for, like I said, for reading, for thinking, for empowering. There are also spaces for communities to organize, for communities to sort of understand their present, shape their future, etc. And almost all of us agree, I mean, just by the virtue of number of people joining this talk, the response that we've got, articles we read, that libraries are great, books are great, access to information is great, free is great, everybody should have access to free books. We hear this rhetoric a lot. And I don't think anybody is going to say, no, terrible, we mustn't let X or Y read. But then why do we not have a national policy that makes sure that every citizen or resident of this country has access to a library? Why is there no, why is the public library infrastructure in India weak? I mean, I would say it's not as great as it could be. Why do we not have a national policy? Why do we not have a public library infrastructure? And do things like barriers like caste, class, gender have anything to do with this paralysis in having a national policy or creating a national policy? These are some questions we hope to unpack in this talk with Preedip. Preedip Balaji is a senior librarian from IIHS and he's joining us for this conversation. Preedip works with Indian Institute of Human Settlements. It's a national educational organization that works to studying and documenting human settlements and ultimately work towards transforming them into a more equitable space. And he's been with them for a decade now. He's also a senior research fellow with ISI, the Indian Statistical Institute, and is pursuing his doctorate. And he was, prior to this, he was with Indian School of Business and IKP, Knowledge Park in Hyderabad for 3 years. And what captured this Free Library Network's attention was really a paper that Preedip wrote and published. It's available in the public domain. It's called A Policy Review of Public Libraries in India. He published this in 2018. A version of that article, policy paper is also available in Scroll and India Spend as an article titled, How Much Does India Spend on Its Libraries? I've sent these two articles to many of you by mail or by WhatsApp. I'm also pasting it in the chat box here. These articles give a lot of data about public libraries in India in a very easy to read and digest kind of way. So it's great if you can get a chance to sort of look at them. We at FLN have been trying in our own way to gather data. How many libraries are there in India? How many libraries should they be? How much is government spending on libraries? What are library budgets like? And while doing this research, mostly internet research, we couldn't really find answers anywhere. But what we found was this policy paper written by Preedip, and so we decided let's just have a conversation with Preedip to understand what he's decoded, his journey to the data that he's got. And so that's why he's here today. And so we have invited Preedip to talk to us about national policy with regard to library, legislation with regard to library, any data he may share. And when I'm saying public library over and over again here, I'm referring to libraries set up by the state or managed by the state or run by the state or with some involvement from the government. A lot of you here are running community libraries of your own. In this discussion, we are talking about government-run libraries and what the public library infrastructure is. what is the state doing for us? And so we'll start off on this talk just to give you an idea of the structure. First, for about 20 minutes or so, there are many questions I'm dying to ask Preedip, so I'm going to use this opportunity to sort of do an interview style format, and I'll run through some questions. After the first 20 minutes, then all of you can please fill in the gaps in our discussion. There will be many. Ask questions that you have, share your thoughts, ideas, etc. And after that, please stick around for a few key takeaways so we can summarize a few key takeaways from the session. And if anybody wants to know more from FLN, we can give you a short brief then. And for now, I mean, most of you are on mute, so stay on mute when we are doing the interview. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat box. We'll try to get to it in the Q&A session, or during the Q&A session, use the hand icon so we can get to you to ask for a question. So delving now straight to the talk that we are all here for. Hello, Preedip. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so Preedip, first I wanted to ask you, we're so happy to be here. I'm so happy to see this audience. Tell us about your role as a librarian, what libraries mean to you, and what prompted you to sort of do research in this area?
I think I lost you in between, Madhu.
Okay, so I mean, the first thing I asked was, tell us about what you love about libraries and as by being a librarian. So I don't know if I've lost network or Preedip has lost network.
We can hear you, Madhu.
Oh, okay. I think it's back.
Yeah, sorry, I've lost you in between. Yeah.
No problem. So so what do you love about libraries and what do you love about being a librarian?
Sorry, Madhu, could you repeat it? Sorry,
So I wanted to ask you, what prompted you to research in this area of public libraries, and what sort of interested you in being a librarian? I mean, what is your favorite part of the job?
Okay. Yeah, sorry, the connection is a little unstable, so I've lost. Yeah. So it was a serendipitous discovery, if I may say so. Yeah, the love for reading and meeting people is something that I was growing up curious about. So yeah, when in my college days, the library system did not have an open access system, so we would ask the library, we would have to request, and they would go to the
We've lost your connection again, Preedip.
Oh. I think we'll wait for a few minutes for Preedip to come back. I've just posted his links to his articles here, and he's done quite a lot of sort of deep diving into finding out numbers on the public library landscape in India, how many libraries we have, etc. So that's good to look at. So just please bear with us for a few minutes. We'll just I'll message Preedip and see what his technical difficulties are. He's back.
My apologies. Yeah. So meeting new people, discovering ideas, and exchanging them is something that motivated. And my practice has been mostly in academic and research settings. So yeah, at mostly at service levels, be it collection development and all the technical work in a library setting. Yeah.
And so Preedip, I mean, now I'm getting to sort of the meat of it. What is our policy with regard to public libraries? What is the national policy? And sort of, maybe a very basic sort of question. we say what is the government doing, but who in government is supposed to be in charge of libraries? Which department,
Yeah.
which area, who has ownership to oversee development in the area of public libraries?
Yeah, actually, we all have these questions, what constitutes a library and what, how they are organized and how the staffing works and how the fiscal matters are taken care and all these questions. So I'm going to quickly read from the IFLA UNESCO Public Library Manifesto, which was recently updated in July. The public library is a local gateway to knowledge, provides basic condition for lifelong learning, independent decision making, and cultural development of the individual and social groups. It underpins healthy knowledge societies through providing access to and enabling the creation and sharing of knowledge of all sorts, including scientific and local knowledge, and without commercial, technological, or legal barriers. And what is the library that I can relate to as an individual or as a group of communities, or as a society in general? How do I relate to? This is in one of the researchers' lens. Public library as a place, as a space, as a maker space, and as a relationship. She said she shares a relationship with the library. The library as a place is within the city, as a landmark, and as a catalyst of urban development. The library as a place for social interaction and as an important knowledge hub of the public domain, and as an experience, the library as a relation is with other cultural institutions and creative entrepreneurs. So this definition is important to understand how public libraries are defined, and how do we relate to this as a space, as a place, as a relationship. And this definition is something was recently updated by the UNESCO IFLA manifesto, which initially was released in 1992 and was recently updated. So Madhu, you started off defining the library, how, what I mean by public library, what sources funds the library and so on. So I think this understanding is important for us. And, as an individual, as a collective, technically, public library is something that is funded and governed by the public library bodies. But as diverse as we are, we have vast number of libraries. On one end, we have academic libraries, on the other end, we have community and village libraries. So we are a very diverse system, a public library system in the breadth of our country. So yeah.
So, I mean, in fact, that is one of the things that I wanted to come to later. How we are talking about what is the policy with regard to public libraries, but what is our state's understanding of public libraries is something I wanted to discuss. And the IFLA definition is very interesting in that context. But just could you give us, before I get to that, could you just, to set us up, give us a backdrop of what is the role of the Ministry of Culture, for example? What's the national, is there a national policy on libraries? What are the few bodies or departments that are responsible for overseeing library policy in India? I agree, you said we are diverse, there are many different kinds of libraries, but if there is to be a nodal sort of, where should we first look if we want to look for data on public libraries in India?
Yeah, this question is something has been been going on for a while with me. I started off finding the motivation for this research came to me from the institution. I work at an interesting space where we balance the academic interest with the public facing interface. So, we work on IHS works and broadly on urban questions. And so when questions came up within our team meetings, and when the IHS management has been very clear from the beginning that library is open to the public, should be open to the public. And we weren't opened when we opened it in 2012. So when we opened it in 2014, we had a vision that this library is a community space. It's an happening space. Anyone, without being asked their identity, can walk in, and it's a free an open space for anyone. And so we opened the library in 2014, and over the years, my interaction with the community, we had membership plans that we opened up for anyone to take the membership if they wanted to borrow. But otherwise, it's a walk-in free library. There is no restriction for anyone. And it is also closely tied to the institutional mission or other events that we align with. So that kind of prompted me to ask a question: where is our public policy? Why, do we have enough data, that that could be interpreted or could be spoken or in the public discourses, that why in the first place we don't have enough data about public libraries. Do we have policies on public libraries? And if not, what is that we could do to that our voices could be amplified in that space? So that prompted me to send an RTA query to the Ministry of Culture, and that's when I from there I took on to pick this writing beyond the things that are written in the popular press. So we don't have a national policy, and we have policies that being discussed through the different 5-year plans, but nationally we don't have a policy. It's a state subject, so state governs them, and we have 19 states have the public library legislations. Only 5 have a library tax or library cess. So, and we have Tamil Nadu having the highest of 10%, a part of the property surcharge that is collected by the city corporations all the way through the municipal panchayats, and 0.5 percentage from the liquor sales in Goa. So the Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Karnataka, Goa, these are the only 5 southern states having the library legislation. The other 16 states have the legislation, but they don't have a library tax as such collected. And there are Madhya Pradesh to Himachal Pradesh and others who don't have any library legislation at all.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm just sharing I don't know if everybody can see this. I'm just sharing a slide which just summarized what Preedip said with regard to state legislation. I'm just recapping. So, there's no national policy as such, but I think there have been attempts in the past to have national policies, but none of them have gotten fully adopted. And libraries is not a central subject, so each state can sort of create its own laws and legislations around it. In India, 19 states have legislation, 5 of them provide for cess. Now, what cess is, etc., we'll break it down in a little bit more detail as we go further. So when you say, you say there is no national policy, etc., like where do we go for answers like basic questions like how many libraries are there in India? So I guess we have to look at state-based counts. Before that, could you give me a brief sort of setting up of what the Raja Ram Mohan Roy Library Foundation is? Because a lot of data about libraries numbers are there. Lakshmi, are you saying Kerala is not in the list of legislations? Kerala does have a library legislation. It also has a funding model, but we'll come to that in a bit.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the Rajaram Mohan Roy Library Foundation and what does it do? And I wanted to talk about the briefly about what the National Mission on Libraries is. Because before I go into state and sort of try to understand more about what cess and taxes, etc., I wanted to understand, okay, nationally we don't have a policy, but we do have an autonomous body, RRMLF. And then recently there was, and then National Mission on Libraries, something that the reports came out recently. So Preedip, if you could just give our audience a brief backdrop of what RRMLF is and what NML is.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed out the policy thing. Effectively, we don't have a national policy, for the culture sector in general, but there have been attempts by different people. The Chattopadhyay, Professor Chattopadhyay report on national policy system or something came out in 1986, but it was not implemented. And it is not something that we, wanted to look in silo. It's something also in a broader context of culture sector where our conversations is also tied to culture sector in general, where we wanted to look at library, not only just libraries, but archives, museums, galleries, all the other institutions which are tied in the culture sector. So there is under the Ministry of Culture, there have been many attempts have been made, but I don't think we have anything, a formal policy as such. And we have a National Library Act, we have a national library, and under the Ministry of Culture, we have a couple of libraries which are funded and run by the Ministry of Culture. But effectively, we don't have any policy. And I think we made multiple attempts to do it, but yeah, I think it's time that all of us come together and discuss and move this discussion forward to have, ask for policies for the citizens, by us and for us. So I'll move on to the question that you brought out. So the Rajaram Mohan Roy Library Foundation is something, as an institution, is an autonomous body in the Ministry of Culture. So it is mandated to support public libraries through grants, through programs that would improve the infrastructure of libraries, help in calendaring events, be it conferences or anything that could financially be supported across libraries is something that, and especially supporting the public library, the RR MLF has the mandate to do. And as a funding body in the for the public libraries, RRMLF have brought out the National Mission on Libraries, and we should understand the National Mission on Libraries is a much wanted initiative from the government to support the public libraries and to take a stock of what we have on the ground. So how many libraries we have, how many have grown over the years since independence, and where do we stand in terms of staffing, training, organization building, improving infrastructure, facilities, amenities, and strong questions like equity, inclusion, all these principles that the libraries stands for. So I think it was a much needed initiative, rolled out in 2014, has been in operation since then. When I was doing this research, I couldn't find much data, but in the last 3-4 years, the data has been encouraging to see there is a national level qualitative research on public libraries, and then the 4 deliverables that they brought out are these: the capacity building of libraries and for librarians, and setting up a set of model libraries, and the national virtual libraries as was shown on the screen. So, and through this, the National Mission Library for the first time have done nationally a survey with a sample of about 12,000 of people, both users and non-users. And yeah, so this is wonderful to see this. It's a very small sample. When we say the sample size that they've taken, the sample is something that relates to one rural library which exists for in India at the moment, according to the census. So it also prompts me to leave this information that we have, according to the census 2011 census, we have 70,817 libraries in rural areas and 4,518 urban areas, which is serving a population of 830 million and 370 million respectively. This is according to the census. So this also can be interpreted that for every 11,500 people, there is a rural library, and for 80,000 people, there is an urban library. So this is the first time the data about it came out in the public domain, which is part of the census. Household amenities, and there are tables that can give the links to, which is for the first time have come up so officially.
This is fantastic, Pradeep, because that was sort of one of the questions I wanted to ask you. How many public libraries are there in India? I also do want to talk about NML, but I think we will circle back to it.
Yeah.
And there is so much data with regard to public libraries. I'm just sharing a slide here. Pradeep shared data from the survey, from the census, sorry. About how many libraries,
census, yeah.
11th census. Now, if you go to the Rajaram Mohan Roy Library Foundation website, they will give you a different number. They say we have 46,746 libraries in India. This goes to about one library for every 30,000 people. And I've put a little chart here. This is all actually from Preedip's papers. Different sources have come up with different number of libraries, including the census data, which is also there in his paper. So please do take a look. Now, and then there is another survey which Mritula had brought to my attention recently, an IFLA survey, which says we have 1.5 million libraries, which is fantastic. That means we have, but I think we should disregard the data. But I think overall we are floating with the numbers 46,000, 50,000, 60,000 maybe. And I think these are also highly inflated numbers. Just to give an example, this Raja Ram Mohan Roy Foundation, which has 46,746 libraries registered on it. These are registered libraries, so include state, central libraries, etc. Out of this number, 918 are school libraries. So out of 46, so school libraries are great, but they're not necessarily what we conceive of when we are talking about public libraries accessible to all. These are school libraries that operate within a school setup and timing. And then I was very surprised to see 19,000 of those were NGOs, etc. So they must be NGOs that have grants from RRLF, so that's why they're registered and so on. But again, it's very dicey in 46,000 to club these libraries also. And but anyway, taking an optimistic view, say we have 46, 47,000 libraries, we have about one library for every 30,000 person in India. And again, these are all rough calculations and approximations, because so it's easy for the talk. They're not exact numbers, they're all rounded up considerably. So 1 in 30,000. And in this context, I sort of wanted to ask you, why is it so difficult for us to find out how many public libraries we have in India? I mean, you said 19 states have legislation, so we should have state libraries. The legislation says there should be district libraries, etc. And so who do we go to for data? Census says one thing, RRLMF says another thing. And the also related question is, how many libraries should we have? Is there any guideline? Is there anything that gives us guidance of, if we are a population of 1.6 billion people approximately? So what kind of numbers would we need to say that we are meeting the needs of our population well?
Yeah.
So we can see at least what the gap is, where we are and where we should be.
Yeah, this is you put a question together very well. This is something that prompted me in the first place to find out why we don't have enough data on public libraries. So this was one of the primary reason I sent an RTA query to find out, and to understand in a socio-economic perspective to the community I serve and to the people that a public library belongs to. I should know who they are and what kind of demography it is and what kind of people live there and all that. And for that, I should have the data, and it could be a multilingual background people live there, or migrants who are working out here and things like that. So to me, to us, to be able to help in policy making or to understand locally where my library is and what is that it could do to help people to understand their needs, to address their concerns. So this in the first place was the background and motivation to me to send an RTA query. And it is something that I've been grappled with as a practitioner. I never worked in a government library technically, but being in this space and this decade of experience at IHS, I've opened a lot of questions at why that we don't have enough libraries, and why in the library, library information science backgrounds at conference and other things, the community engagement is something that's very less discussed. And we have technology being widely talked, and we are be it semantic web or AI to the libraries, and all that is good. But why is that we don't understand community as an important question for as a backbone for the library? So this RTA that sent to the Ministry of Culture, I got a response from RRMLF and Delhi Public Library and other 6-7 libraries which are under the Ministry of Culture, but nobody gave the data how much are we spending on public libraries? What is the per capita expenditure? We could find data for education, for healthcare, but for libraries, we don't have data in the public domain, historically speaking. So, and I didn't get the data what I wanted. But in the course of research, I was able to find out the data for the developed countries, but I couldn't find much about for the developing countries, and mainly the South Asia and the Southeast Asian countries. So, and it is not apples and oranges. We can't really, match our underspending of library for the libraries to the developed countries. So, but to put it plain, getting the data itself was a difficult thing to do, and it is not available. And I think the Rajaram Mohan Library Foundation and others should certainly step up more to to connect the dots where are we, what kind of diversity we have, all the way from cities to the village panchayat levels, and what is that we could do to, connect the dots to build the public library system as an important human development indicator and as a social infrastructure for the growing country and communities.
For the audience, I just wanted to clarify, give some background. In Preedip's policy paper, he attempts to answer a very simple question: what is the per capita expenditure on libraries? And he has gone through census data, he has gone through some states' budgets, he's gone through portal states which put up their library budgets, etc. And this RTI query that he is referring to, he sent a query to Rajaram Mohan Roy Library on per capita spend. What he got was being redirected to 8 different libraries, and not central libraries, Delhi Public Library, some other specific academic library, etc. So he got diverted. Then he pursued with them also, and with some of them he got their budgets, their entire budgets, which is quite impressive. You can see that in his paper also. You have the budget of the Delhi Public Library, but ultimately you can't get the question of how many libraries are there in India, how much are we spending per capita on library. That data is not there, and I don't think anybody's hiding this data. This data doesn't exist because nobody's collating it. We are not looking at this at a macro level. How many libraries should there be? In that slide I put up, there is a recommendation from IFLA, which is an international body for library advocacy. It recommends that ideally there should be one library for every 3,000 people. Yeah. And I think we are at one library at 30,000 at a very optimistic level when we are taking in school libraries, etc. So one big problem, I think, in any sort of discussion on policy, law, legislation, what should our library policy be? We don't know where we are, and so how can we plot where we have to go and how much investment needs to go into the space? When we simply don't even know how many libraries we have, how many we should have. I mean, the kind of questions that Preedip raised, like know the community, the profile of the community, and then the library that will serve that community, I think that's the right way to go about it, but I don't think that is the approach that is there. So it was great. I was very excited about the National Mission on Libraries, which came out with its survey report, because I had felt when Preedip wrote the paper, this NML was not there. Yeah. And he has mentioned in his paper that when NML reports comes out, a lot of these questions will be answered. Some questions were answered, but I have disappointments because it doesn't address this question, because I think the data is not there, like how many libraries exist and what the per capita spend is. But there are some interesting takeaways from the National Mission on Libraries report. I put the link in the chat box. Small things. I mean, they have surveyed about 5,000 libraries, I think, in different states. The NML survey itself admits that they could not get data for many states, similar to what Preedip admitted, that the data is not available for many states. They've surveyed 5,000 libraries, and one good takeaway for me is that they say in the last 3 years, library membership has always been steadily increasing. In a time when we are talking about, internet, all information is available on the internet, people don't read books anymore, etc. People are still going to libraries, no matter what kind of system it is, etc. There is a need for this institution. People recognize the need. Where it's available, people avail it. And even through the pandemic, etc., we've seen a rise in membership. So that for me is an interesting takeaway. There's also data in the NML reports, like how much people want resources in regional languages, etc. This may be of interest to some of you. But for me, overall, I think it was disappointing because a lot of the answers to these big macro questions were not, I think for me, it was not there. And now, Preedip, I'm changing tracks a little bit because, you talked about state legislations and cess, and I wanted to delve into that also. But before I sort of go into that, one thing I wanted to ask you about is so 19 states have legislation on libraries, and what is their definition of a public library? You told us about the IFLA definition, but like as a sample, what are some of the state legislation's definitions of library?
Yeah,
or public library?
Yeah, this is something that the public library legislation defines public library something that is funded by the public, and the budgets are coming from the government. These are two important criteria that I could think of for all the legislations, the 5 legislations that we, sorry, not the 5, all the legislation that we have. But yeah, in terms of budgets and others, it's greatly varied to one country to the other, depending upon the income, the sources of budget that they legislated it from. In Tamil Nadu, property tax, a surcharge of property tax, is at the 10% is should be given to the Department of Public Libraries from the urban or rural local bodies, which are the governing bodies for the different communities, cities, and towns. At Karnataka, if you take the Bangalore, Bangalore has the BBMP, the Brihut Bangalore Mahanagarapalike, the city corporation body.
Corporation.
Yeah, the corporation, in the annual revenue that they get from the within the BBMP limits, get crores of amount, that a part of that which as available in the public domain is runs into 400 to 600 crores of rupees that should be transferred by the BBMP to the Department of Public Libraries. And yeah, so that's how the legislation with the libraries says things work for the states where there is the tax is being collected, and this tax vary to different countries. And in Andhra it's 8%, and at Karnataka it's a 6%, and Kerala has I'm not sure about the exact percentage, and the Goa is at 1.57%, and that is basically from the foreign beverages sales and so on. So this amount should be transferred from the municipal bodies to the Department of Public Libraries, which are legislated, which are governing and administering bodies for the public libraries.
Okay, so to recap, state legislations that provide for libraries, various states that have legislation for libraries, there are typically two models. One is through a cess, which 5 states have. The idea is that citizens pay taxes. I know about Karnataka, but when you pay property tax in Kannada, there's a library cess. So most people who pay property taxes are paying a library cess as well. And different states have different cesses. And I think the states that don't have cess tend to go with grants from the state government. So there's a library legislation that says you must have a library. They've even provided a source of funding. Some places grant, some places cess. And generally the argument is that cess is more sensible because it's a recurring tax. A grant is fixed once and then it has to be reviewed, and I think Maharashtra has a grant of some, I forget a particular amount, but it was fixed years ago and never been revised. But with the cess, the thing is it's linked, it's a percentage, so it's linked to your property tax. So the cess seems obviously to be a better solution. But I think from what Preedip has said, there's a huge problem, because the body that is collecting the cess is usually the municipal body. The bodies that are running the libraries is Department of Libraries, which is separate. And as he said, in Karnataka, there is about 4,000 crores that is collected for as library cess that is outstanding from the municipality to the Department of Libraries. And there is no outrage over this at all, because there is no political will, I think, to make sure that so there is a process, there is a budget, etc. But you can't blame the Department of Libraries as well, because they're severely underfunded, because maybe it's not a priority area. You'd rather the municipal corporation would rather direct those funds towards things like roads, infrastructure, etc. Other things that may be more voter friendly, so to say. And I don't know what the answer is. What do you do when one department doesn't transfer money to the other? But there has to be something in the way we frame our legislation and our policy, this fundamental disconnect where the department utilizing the fund is not given autonomy to collect the fund. It has led to a bit of a failure. And I think this has happened in all states where there are cess. There is an outstanding. The cess is collected. The cess is collected from the citizens, but it doesn't go towards the department that is to spend it. And that gap, I don't know how to address it, but I think that this is a design flaw in the legislation itself, right? This lack of linkage. So I want to open up to an open Q&A soon, but just before that, I sort of want to ask Preedip. I hope I've recapped most of what you said accurately. And so you've seen at a national policy level, there is no policy. At a state policy level, there are I think two, three problems. One big thing is about the cess and how it's transferred, and the grant system also has problems. In my head, a big problem is that public libraries are not defined very well. I think it needs to be fleshed out a bit more. But what sort of policy changes uh, do we need? Or to put it another way, what are the current problems with policy, and what are there any? What should we be agitating for? Are there any quick fixes we can be lobbying for? There probably isn't also, but what is your view?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot. So the legislations which are enacted are until now, as recently as 2009 legislation in Arunachal Pradesh, if I'm correct, the latest state that have legislation. I think the library cess is something that is a very effective means, legally, that libraries could independently work and run, for the communities. Something that has deteriorated from the 10% all the way, and we are annually waiting for the government's release of funds for the public libraries, and not to mention the states where there is no legislation, they're just r- working on their own without any legislation, or there are volunteers and NGOs run libraries, and so on. I think this is something that something should be immediately to be addressed. And the oldest one, the Madras Library Act itself, is done in 1948, and there are some positive news that are coming out, that they are right now looking at the legislation to revise it, and they've been working on to improve the public library school system in the Tamil Nadu state. And I also know that I've been tracking news developments in Karnataka, where they set up a digital library, Karnataka State Digital Library, for remote access to the electronic resources and so on. And so there are some positive developments that are happening, but to put things in perspective, I think what we have to work towards is to integrate the library system, regardless of their organization structures and function. So on one end, we have well-funded or well-budgeted scientific and academic libraries who have budgets in crores running on taxpayers' money. And whereas the public libraries system is very sidelined, there's not much discourses, or not in the mainstream media, being discussed about. There is a coverage, there is an outrage that why we promote the culture of reading, and why culture, arts, and public libraries should be at the center of it. But I think we should do more, and as librarians and practitioners, and everybody around in the space should raise our voice, and what is it that we could do from a individual perspective, or as an organizational collective, that we could do to raise our voice, to see where do we see ourselves, and what are the challenges we face. And speaking up for the libraries, for the library workers, and for the as an important social infrastructure in the fabric of society. It ties to the local governance, it ties to the the art and the culture umbrella within the society that we are linked with, and it is tied to the quality of living. To me, library as a community space, what does it mean to me? Is it something that as a space, as a place, as a place making space to me, that I can run into anytime to check out resources, to speak to an author who is visiting the place, or check out resources for my children, and attend a film screening. There are, yeah. So I think the policies should be more widely discussed, should be ideated, should be discussed practically, rationally, what is possible, that we bring public libraries into the mainstream discussions and in the policies. And how do we go about, how do we simplify, how do we demystify the myths that we have around public libraries? It just not for one particular group of people, or it just not a place for only for reference books, it just, or for display of books. No, libraries mean so much to individually all of us, as we would identify that with. And I think we should think of ways, both in terms of lobbying, to be our voices to be heard to the policymakers, and at a very local level, how do we uh, um, revive the system practically, through both in policies and as well as in practice.
Now I'll sort of, you've heard a lot of the two of us, so I'd like to open up the discussion. Anybody has queries, please use the uh, your hand icon. I see a query from Nivedita. Nivedita, would you like to ask the question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Pradeep and Madhu, for explaining this very beautifully. When I used to read papers on library and policies and about public libraries, I would be totally confused. I would never
They're
understand
also
what's all
confused.
this mess. My question is: should this library movement, a public library, a free open access library, should it begin from bottom up, from the grassroots, or should it begin from a central policy which actually does brings all kinds of libraries under its umbrella, and sort of creates a give and take between people who want to do something for the society and people and the government? Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great question. Also, it's a bouncer because yeah, I mean, Pradeep, I know Pradeep's views on this, but I'll let him elaborate on it. But he strongly believes that decentralization is very necessary. He believes that effective interventions can happen only at a community level when you're intimately engaged with the community you're working with, and of course, therefore, grassroots sort of each area and each sort of it has to go down to the district level, each state, etc. And in that sense, I think it's good that we don't have a national act that mandates what libraries should be, what kind of books there should be there. Each community should have autonomy to sort of run its own libraries as per its needs. But I feel what is lacking at a national level is data. Some kind of standards, what accessible to public means. It just simply things like, not that membership fees, for example, is a barrier. Asking for identity or restricting access to a certain group is a barrier. So I think few things need to have a central sort of mandate, which is primarily access and also collection of data. How many people are you serving? What is the community? How many libraries should be there? And definitely funding as well, I think, needs to come from the center. But there has to be root level interventions, and I know Pradeep is very passionate about it. So, did we lose Pradeep? Okay. So I know Pradeep's view is that local committees should be able to collect their own funds, run it the way they want to serve the needs of their community. Oh, Pradeep, you're back, so please go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost between. Yeah, this is a very, very important question, and it's also a very complex question. It's something I echo what Madhu said, something that tied to a very local.
Is it me, or is it frozen for everybody?
Frozen for everyone.
Okay. Sometimes I never know if it's my internet or everyone's. So, Nirita, I believe that it has to be, there needs to be some national movement for urgency and for funds. But I think interventions have to be at a local level, and there has to be autonomy at the local level. But unfortunately, since Pradeep is on and off, I think we'll just wait for him to come back. Meanwhile, Lakshmi, do you want to ask?
Meanwhile, yeah, because mine is a related question, and maybe my understanding of this is very basic. What is the system of governance right now? So, if you look at, I understand that there is this libraries is a state mandate, and is it separate for public libraries? Because I know that in Karnataka, the panchayat libraries is with the rural development department. So how are they, how is the largest structure on what are the different kinds of libraries, and who is who is taking lead on governance? So in terms of National Mission of Libraries, I understand that Raja Ram Mohan Rai Library foundation was supposed to be like a central governing body. I don't know if how to what extent that has happened. So Pradeep, if you could throw some light on what it is exactly looking like now before we get into what it should look like ideally.
Sorry, I lost the connection between. I got the second part of the question. Could you repeat the first one?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what is the governance structure right now, Pradeep, with respect to different kinds of libraries. the
Mm.
public libraries, the panchayat libraries, and of course school libraries and all of that have a different system, but at least the ones which are largely open to the community and the public at large, what is the system of governance?
Yeah, so the organization structure of library is quite fragmented, and it is, so we are specifically talking in the context of public libraries, but we have, beyond the public libraries, we also have academic libraries, we have special libraries, and we have libraries which are running in prison and hospitals and all of that. So basically each of this library function differently, and if as an academic, in an academic settings, the libraries work closely with the head of the institution. You have specifically the 4-5 sections, like cataloging department is one, which is after the books are acquired into the library, you process the books and make it available to go to the service desk. Whoever asks can pick it up. Acquisition department is something that understands what the users asked and set the process to identify the booksellers and get the books to the library. And electronic resources library is something that covers the continuing, like magazines, periodicals, and negotiate with the vendors, which requires payment in advance for the ensuing year, and make sure the content is accessible, journals, academic journals or magazines, electronic databases. So electronic resources is one. And then you have circulation department, which would take care of the check-in, check-out of the resources and help users. And all of this also ties to training, giving training, to the users to help them with maybe, how to run a plagiarism check for a writing, or helping them with assignment, or helping students with the required and recommended readings, and all the other queries. So this is a structure in a functional support that I'm saying, 4 or 5 departments, which is how academic libraries work. And if you change this into a public library setup, you have library liaisons who go out to the community and have a talk with them to know, do the families or children need any support, or you run events, you program and run events for the community. It could be a training program, it could be a talk with an author, it could be a training session of how to prepare a PPT for a common user, which I have done in my library for the users from the neighborhood, and so on. So largely,
sorry to interrupt you, but I'm not sure if my question was clear. But I'm just saying that given the different kinds of library landscapes that we have, that is a public library, the panchayat library, the academic libraries, and I completely hear you when you say that the governance systems are fragmented. But in terms of other than academic libraries and school libraries and others which remain tied to an institute, when it comes to community and public libraries in general, which is supposed to be open to the public, what is the governance system like beyond? I mean, you're talking about internal governance, but I'm talking about externally, like for the community libraries here in Karnataka is tied to the rural development department right now. So how is that? How does that look like across states? I just wanted to understand.
Yeah, so this is something that I was trying to paint a link from a very local, from a very practical perspective. So the organizational structure for the libraries is something that is missing. So you have a local, say you have a village library level. So you are waiting for the books to come from the higher ups. So see, if you are in a rural library, that either you are waiting for the books to come, or you don't have, or there should be infrastructure to put the books. So, or through my field visit, or my understanding is that the rural libraries don't have big, buildings as such. So you have only reading spaces, only papers are put, not really much books. So again, it differs to place. And the organization structure is that all the way down to the rural libraries, they are tied to the state central library. So the capital library, in all the legislated states, we have the state central library. So the state central library have a state level director or a deputy director, and he has a couple of directors in Bangalore. For the at the BBMP level, we have joint directors at the 3, 4, 5, 6 zones, East, West, and Mahadevpura and other. So these directors directly go and control the libraries in their zones. And then in the same way, go for the other tier 2 city. If I take Tumkur or Devnagari or other libraries, you have um, library director at the district level, and then you have library staff, and at grade 1, 2, 3, all the way down. So, and at the very grassroots level, you have volunteers who may have a certificate in library information science, who work partly and where there's not enough books stocked and all this, and so you wait from your higher ups for stocking enough books, or stocking the resources that you want for your libraries, in terms of increasing the newspapers, or reading spaces, or expanding the building structures, and so on. So this is the organization structure of public libraries works in state level. And my contention is that we should integrate the public libraries with other existing libraries, so that we can lend and borrow from other libraries through a proper legislation. And what has been purchased and organized in other academic libraries or other libraries in the area, with the proper local plan, all the way from the bottom up to the state level at a capital level, we could connect all the libraries, and then lend, borrow resources, leverage the resources that are already there in other libraries. So we fill the gaps between the different type of libraries that we have. Sorry if I...
Yeah, Lakshmi, I think also most states have their legislations, and all of them have a process for governance, department of libraries. They are different for different states. I think one area where you can look for more information, I think in Appendix 2 of Preedip's paper, actually, it's a easy to digest kind of a way of reading it. In a tabular form, there's sort of which department controls what in which state. But I think it's quite fragmented now. But I think that's a good place to look at for more information. And as Dr. Rajshekhar Palekar is also saying in the chat box, all acts they define a management of libraries. I'm not fully aware, but I think each state has its own sort of administrative setup. But I want to move on to Soumya, who has had her hand up for quite some time. So Soumya, do you want to ask us?
Yeah, thank you so much. And my question is more in terms of access to journals, right? Because it is so difficult to access, being steep in terms of just getting through articles through JSTOR or elsewhere, wherever. So are there libraries which are actually functional at this point, which give that kind of access to journals, or we are talking about libraries which are accessible with books across age groups, which are more for reading, not just for fun, but maybe things that are easily available? Because I think academic journals is one thing that people suffer even while doing deep research.
Interesting question, Soumya. Yeah, this electronic resources is something that it's a booming industry, where the free labor is tapped in, but the companies make a lot of money, but they don't give back to the society, be it different commercial publishers that we have, and so on. So this is something at present we have National Digital Library of India, which has resources that are subscribed, and anyone can register and use it. I'm not very familiar with the different kind of electronic resources that they offer, but this is an important resource that give a lot of electronic content available for the public. Anyone can register and use it. And another important outcome that came out of the National Mission Libraries is the indiaculture.gov.in, which is part of developing a national virtual library of India. And this portal is also something in a culture space, built in excellent tool as a digital library, collecting artifacts, incunablia, different heritage materials that are digitized and put it in the website. This is one of the outcome of the National Mission on Libraries. So, but otherwise, I'll speak from my practice. At IHS, we have a couple of databases, journals that we have subscribed to. We allow anyone to come in and use them. We don't restrict them. Anyone can come in and use these resources within the premises here. There are a lot of complexities in terms of licensing them, giving remote access to them, and all the electronic service providers. When I say electronic vendors, all these journal vendors basically define users and location in terms of authorized users. So if you are an authorized user, you can access it resources anywhere. So, it has legal implications and so on. So this is something also a very important area, that at a public library space, the resources that are electronic, that any tax-paying citizen should be able to access it, and regardless of the libraries that we are. One very good example from the visit from the Zurich in Switzerland, I would say, the city government of Zurich, the state government of Zurich, and the University of Zurich, they come together, they make this library. It doesn't, it really, if I had the privilege to go and visit the place. So when you walk in, it doesn't matter which user or which background you are from. So they have electronic journals, they have huge computers, and somebody walks in and use the content that you wanted. And this is something, in the policy level, one plan, one subscription has been going on negotiations with the government to enable all the electronic journals are purchased by a government body or an authorized autonomous body that would give licensing access to all libraries all over India. And, that would help everybody in the country. But right now, within academic libraries, they have, specialized consortia for management, for astronomy, and so on. I don't think the public libraries, are equipped enough, which is a reality. And I mean, we don't have electronic resources when we are talking about electronic resources, not to mention the internet access and the computer infrastructure in the public libraries. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Preedip.
Kripa, you have a question?
Hi, I do have a question. Hi, Madhu and Preedip. Thank you. Lovely talk, Preedip. Very informative. I want to specifically stress upon one thing that you mentioned. For every 11,000 people in rural area, there is public library, and for every 80,000 people, there are public libraries in urban areas, is what you mentioned. And this is, my question is in with reference to something that we are dealing with right now. We're trying to set up community libraries across Bombay. Now Bombay is, as you know, so since it's a urban area, one of the things I understand, there's a dearth of public libraries is also because of space. So I want to ask you, are there any other reasons why there is this gap in creating public libraries? We've also identified, like somebody asked in the previous question about the finding provisions in the legislation and understanding spaces where we can create public libraries. So we approached the BMC, where we have found out there are 24 wards where we can set up these public libraries, community libraries and public libraries. And so now we've sort of identified those 24 areas and trying to work with that. But what is also happening is funding, getting funding for for this sort of a massive project is a huge issue, and we don't know who to go approach, and where to go to for funding. So we also thought about grants, but we are often wondering which is the place, which is the platform where we can find library grants. So that's another point I want to ask you about.
Okay, it's a challenging question to answer, and yeah, but it's an important question that you asked this. And I mean, I think as far as the report from the National Mission on Libraries, Maharashtra has the maximum libraries in India.
But out of that, and this data is very interesting. I mean, I just wanted to briefly.
Yeah.
Kripa, first you referenced Preedip's data about 11,500 library for rural, 81 per 80,000 urban. So that very same data is contradicted by Raja Ram Mohan Roy's foundation, which has a different breakup. The National Mission on Libraries says something else. It says for rural populations, there are fewer libraries and greater for urban. So firstly, I think there's a big cloud around that, which areas have libraries and which don't. But I think everybody, almost all reports agree that there is a need, the information gap or information drought is higher in rural areas, and there need to be more libraries to serve those populations. And of course, in terms of your question on Bombay, space is an issue. I'm sure all urban centers have this issue that, we to create a community space. And yeah, it is a challenge, I'm sure, but it's also one of the sort of false challenges or myths. Therefore they say let's throw money into digitization. Everybody can access everything online, because there is no space in cities. But I think it's critical for us to find community spaces in cities. Library needs to be a physical space, and I don't know how to help you with your challenge of where to get grants for libraries. I think all of us grapple with it. It's an area that doesn't have the spotlight. Hopefully there are some grantors on this talk, I'm not sure. Rajaram Mohan Roy's, by the way, one of their jobs is to give grants, to fund libraries. I don't know how the process works. There has to be an application through the state, etc. But they are a funding agency. Their primary RRMLF is primarily a funding agency for libraries. State libraries or many state legislations, and theory only, I don't know practice, but many states have, when they define public libraries, they are libraries run by states, managed by states, or funded by states. So there's a process by which you can apply to I guess you're already pursuing that with BMC. The state does have a budget by which they can fund community libraries run by other people. Someone else had the similar question in the chat box. How do you get NGOs and these kind of community libraries into this fold? The legislation provides some backdrop. I don't know about it in practice, and Preedip also knows about the theory, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we did find, we have identified these hybrid spaces like the community, the CRCs that are running right now within Bombay. There are so many CRCs, the NGO spaces, which are running community resource centers for children, and where libraries can be created. But again, if BMC will take that up to fund it, because these are hybrid spaces again, they're not only libraries.
Many cities have this kind of community spaces, but which many people are not aware of. Like government information centers, which I mean, there is space, but they're supposed to dispense information about government schemes, government policies. They're also supposed to provide the ration, etc. So there are, I mean, in urban planning, they were thoughts for these kind of spaces, but I think there's very little knowledge about them, even within the planning departments, and even more for citizens.
Yeah, thank you, both of you. Wonderful discussion. The one example is that India Habitat Center. I've been to Delhi, but I didn't get a chance to go to India Habitat Center, which houses a couple of organizations, but also has a library that, within the complex that many people can access to. It's a very great initiative, Kripa, but the thing is, legally getting the fund through the legislation is something it's a big challenge. And the struggles of it is something that has an historical context. When Ranganathan drafted the bills, not just now, but since then, he was resisted that the political establishment said that no, you cannot take money for legislation. So since then it's a struggle for libraries to secure funding for the library. So as far as we know, as Madhu put it, the Maharashtra legislation doesn't have a library say, so that it's a big challenge. And grants and other things is as temporary arrangements that we could think of to adjust library operations to run is something that in the long term we need to think how does it going to work. And to be open, in our library we study with the grants and other things, and though we are backed by institution, it's something that we go through budget cuts, people who step out or leave the organization, all that is practically that we go through. So, and our electronic resources is something that takes up a lot of money. Very few basic resources that what we used to have been cut, and pandemic has been bad for everyone. I think I mean, I also feel personally that working with the BMC and find out how what could be possible within the existing framework is something a good start to think of.
Yeah. Thank you, Preedip. Yeah, that's what I think we are doing. We're trying to either crowdfund and work with the BMC, and also trying to pitch for CSR funding currently.
And I just wanted to add, Somaya, just please stick around till the end when Purnima will talk about the Free Library Network and some of what we do. Mridula, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I hope I can articulate what I'm thinking. In running the community library project, one thing that's pretty clear is that there is a great opportunity to tell the truth about why we don't have libraries in this country. Because in telling that truth, we can be very strategic and succeed in joining forces with other movements. There is an anti-caste movement in our country. We do not have libraries in this country, not because there's been some kind of an oversight. Why the national library policy, which was drawn up in the late 80s, didn't pass muster. It says explicitly on page 5, free. And why the current National Mission on Libraries 250-page survey, I've only read the first maybe 70 or 80 pages, mentions thrice in those pages that there is an opportunity here to take small sums of money from people who are willing to pay it, that the survey has found that libraries are essential and vital and that people will pay for them. I know from running the community library project with my comrades that there are hardly any members in our membership of about 7,000 children and adults who are in a position to pay even 20 rupees. I know worldwide public library systems are free, even to the point where in recent years, there has been a movement among within library science and among library science professionals to adopt complete free, like no fines, no security deposits, and so on. So our contention is when you look at who has been excluded and who finds it possible to walk into the Habitat Library, Preedip, you have to look at what has preceded us. Like, why are we here today? Why did Ranganathan struggle to get his act passed? I mean, there were great social movements at that time. Today, of course, is Periyar's birthday. And we have to remember, how did we get here? We didn't get here because the National Mission on Libraries did what it did, or the National Knowledge Commission did not do what it should have, or because the National Library Policy didn't get adopted. We got here because there's a system of exclusion that's very old in our country. And the weight of it sits on the shoulders of children who try to come into our library. And that, of course, informs the kinds of practices and programs we build, but it should also inform the kind of strategies we as a movement take up. I think the anti-caste movement has space for the free library movement. And by joining forces and by telling the truth about where we are today, I think we could actually win this. If we wait for surveys, commissions, we may be waiting into a few more generations.
No, I think
Totally.
that is the truth. Why do we not have a national policy? Why don't we have this? I mean, we have to look at it in the context of a backdrop of exclusion. And yeah, I mean, and I also found that NML frequently talks about things like membership fees, etc. And this sort of defeats the question. Like when in the beginning, when I said in a democracy, you need people to be able to participate in it, to be able to make informed choices. Large parts of our population are simply not allowed to participate in any meaningful way. Libraries can bridge this gap. Then how dare you charge fees to bridge that gap? I mean, it seems counterintuitive, but that is, and the very definition of public libraries in most of the legislations, all of them just talk about public library meaning accessible to the public. That's it. There's nothing more than that. It's not simply about it being a space people can walk into. How do you welcome people into a library? There are barriers already that keep people away from institutions, from public institutions. Any public institution, there's already suspicion, there's already a lack of familiarity, there's intimidation, etc. So libraries have to be a space that welcome people in. So the minute you start talking about things like fees and stop defining what public really means, you're just resting on your history of exclusion and not questioning it.
Thank you, Mrita. Thank you, Madhu. It's well,
There are some
well
questions
articulated.
in the chat box that I'm not able to see. Is there, Purnima, can you see them?
Yeah, just a second. Somebody has asked about the public library patron. Tamil Nadu.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that exactly, but sorry, there's some background noise.
If there is a similar program in other states, no, I'm not very aware.
I'm not aware of the patron program, but if you have information on it, thanks for sharing the link.
Yeah, sorry,
And also, someone has asked if I want to set up a community library, is there any government recognition, etc., required? Wakim, I think. So, no, I mean, there isn't. Anybody can set up a public library, but the question is, what is, I mean, what we are, why we are stressing so much on the state is our discussion is also about what should the state be doing, what is the government's duty, etc. I think that's there. Is there anything else that I missed?
Rabani had asked, how do you bring libraries run by NGO into the policy fold? But I believe Preedip had answered that.
yeah. The NGO, yeah. I mean the concerns, the census from the current report from the Rajaram Foundation list number of libraries that are there, and they also back libraries which seek for grants. So there is a ratio to support such grants if they ask the state libraries to at 60-40 ratio, the 60% from the RR from the Rajaram Foundation and the 40%, and in Northeast it 90 to 10%. So there are grants that are available, and they are recognized and reported. Run by NGO libraries, or volunteers, or specific ethnic groups and others who do reading, other activities related to library or just community spaces as such. Yes, there's an opportunity for everybody to ask for funds, grants. Yeah.
So I think largely, I think audience questions are kind of petering off, and some people have also messaged that they have to go, and we've sort of run well past our original one hour time. So I'll just sort of round off the discussion. Thank you so much, Preedip, for your time. Thank you for asking these questions. Thank you for putting your work out on public domain. I really hope there'll be a update to your paper as well. So there's more for us to see. I mean, for me, I think there are some few takeaways from this session. One is that there's enormous confusion on data, which I think is not, which is true, but it should not be acceptable that we don't know basics of what state expenditure is, etc. And especially when 16 states have legislation, the legislation requires each state to put up reports, its annual budgets, etc. I mean, there are lots of problems. We delved into some of them now, and definitely not all of them. But this should not be a state of affairs that we simply accept that no, there is no data. There should, especially when there is a legislative mandate, this to put out this data, etc. And I think the first question in the Q&A really helped sort of bring up that dichotomy between what should the national level policy be and what should grassroots interventions be. And I think someone also said in the comment box, we do need some kind of national guidance for standards, for quality, etc. So we don't end up with this libraries just for the sake of it within states. But funding and I think standards need to come from a national level, definitely local, and but the system can't be centralized. There has to be local interventions. There has to be decentralization, so each library can respond to its community best. Like someone had asked about journals. Each library needs to serve the community. So if it's serving a research communities, maybe there should be a focus on journal. But if it's serving a different kind of population, it needs to serve, understand the needs of that community. So these have to be sort of local interventions and local decisions that are taken. But yeah, there need to be some national standards. And so my impression really from this talk and from questions that we've heard, etc., is that there is enough appreciation on the need for libraries and the important roles it plays. There is a lot of appreciation, but there's no urgency. And here, I think what Vidula said is very critical. Why is there no national policy? And we need to understand this in the backdrop of exclusion primarily. I think there is a mindset of a deserving and a non-deserving. There's a thought that things like art, culture, intellectual pursuit, etc., is for a deserving kind. And we should be focusing on necessities like roti, kapda, makan. They are paramount, which is true. But I also think it's a myth and it's a sort of a false dichotomy that you need to be of a certain class, caste, gender, etc., to be able to access intellectual pursuits. And I think the community libraries that each of you run in your communities has proven this is a complete and total lie, that reading is for the elite. Reading can be empowering at so many levels. It can transform individuals' lives. You all have seen changes in your library members' lives. It can transform societies, eventually work to transform communities and countries themselves. So this lie and this myth is something that we should keep questioning again and again. We should be agitating for libraries. We should be agitating for more information on library infrastructure and what changes we need at a policy level, etc. This was something that I tried to learn about more in this talk, but honestly, I don't have any answers yet. And I don't think one person will ever have the answers that this policy fix or this legislation fix can be helpful. But I think what there is a need for is more voices in this discussion of policy and lawmaking, etc. Who is included in these discussions and who is excluded, and bringing in the excluded voices, I hope is critical to move this to some kind of resolution. And that is why free is so important and access is so important. And that is also sort of what the Free Library Network is, at the core of the Free Library Network. And one last question before I turn over to Purnima, but one last question for Preedip. Do you have any information? Is there any more reading or research areas that you would like to direct people who want to continue research in this area on their own?
Yeah. So we have curated a small library exhibition called Rooms of Requirement, Libraries as Transformative Spaces. So we came across a couple of readings thanks to Bookworm Trust at Goa, a part of a workshop held to unearth a lot of books which we didn't aware of. So these books are very wonderful, essential readings catering to different age groups. Some of them are fiction, some of them are true stories, very wonderful stories. Right to Me is a wonderful story about how a librarian kept in touch with a Japanese, expat group who, because of the tensions between US Japanese relationships, and the librarian kept in touch with the group who were moved out of the location, but she kept sending the books to them and she encouraged them to read and so on. So she kept them occupied. So it was very wonderful read, and so are many other stories. Pura Pulpure, recently New York City have named a street in name of her, where she brought in a lot of Puerto Rico stories as a librarian and documented it. So a street recently have named her street was named after her. So yeah, it's a wonderful set of books, and it's also part of a public reading list at the library. So yeah, it's a wonderful set of readings. We could think through further, some important questions that we raised here. And yeah, I would recommend you to see this.
I'm going to place in the chat box a link to some of these books that Preedip mentioned. Just in a few minutes, I'll just put it in the chat box. These are all books that I just showed in the screen, and some books about what library and librarianship means. For more research on the area, you can look at these policy papers that we had shared earlier, as well as the RRMLF website, which does have what statistics there are available, and the IFLA website as well. And now I'll sort of turn over to Purnima to just introduce a Free Library Network to those here who are not part of the network or who want to know more.
Thank you so much, Madhu. Thank you so much, Preedip. That was really such a succinct, and you clearly laid out what's actually going on. And I would say that the Free Libraries Network actually should not exist, because India should be a country where the public library system is so strong and reaches every corner of this country that we actually don't need the Free Libraries Network. But since we are here, let me just give you a brief about who we are. We are a collective of libraries and library practitioners who are working at the grassroots and who are providing free and excellent library services to their own communities. These are community owned and operated libraries most often. So they are not institutionally supported. They are not housed in either a government or any other larger university or research organization. And they are really functioning in a lack of many kind of resources, of course, material resources, financial resources, but also lack of public support, lack of often library science know-how. But these libraries are doing very powerful work in their communities. And by nature of being community owned and operated, there is a certain understanding of the library as a collective space of intellectual growth, intellectual thought, empowerment, free thinking. How do you build a free thinking community? There are certain pockets of knowledge that all of our practitioners have, which I don't think has reached the public discourse. And one of the big reasons that Free Libraries Network exists is to articulate that when we say there's no data, there is no data for libraries like the kind that exist in the Free Libraries Network. And at this point, we are a 100+ strong network. That is 100 distinct grassroots libraries. And I have no doubt that there are thousands more that exist in this country. And we have sort of fallen through the cracks because we are not defined as legitimate library reading spaces in any of the policy or any of the legislation that we see. There's a lot of confusion about defining what the public library is in itself. So we advocate for that, we campaign for that. We will continue to have more of these conversations to really make a space for the community library that is owned by the community, where the community is saying, this is what we want our library to look like. And free is a huge part of it. Free, of course, zero membership fee, but also free, as many of you said, from all of those barriers that keep people out. And also like that make the definition of a reader very narrow. So when we say that, oh, in India or in the world, people don't read anymore, but in India, where are the readers? Or in India, the readers have been lost to the smartphone and YouTube and all of that. Who are these readers we are talking about? So these conversations we are hoping to, as a collective, have in Free Libraries Network and make a huge noise about it while empowering ourselves at the grassroots level. So thank you to everyone who attended. We are on the internet as www.fln.org.in. So please come find us. We're on all the social media platforms, and we will keep having these kind of events, and we will keep like knocking on those doors and saying, we exist, our readers exist. So thank you so much to everyone who joined. Yeah, that's my time.
And thank you, Preedip, so much for all of the information you shared with us. And thank you everybody else who joined also. And I think we made good time. So thank you for giving your Saturday evening for this talk on public libraries. So bye all.
Thanks everyone. Thanks Madhu, thanks Mridula, everyone. There's a lot of learning, and thanks for this engaging conversations. It's very interesting, and to learn and hear from each one of you. You're all doing a wonderful job. More power to you. And I think we should all stand together and grow stronger. Thanks so much.
And in future, we hope to have such conversations in different Indian languages, Hindi for sure. So we'll keep this going. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll sign off now.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Madhu, you want to hang on for a bit? Or Madhu and Preedip, if you want to hang on for a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.